All right, Rich, I have Joy, I have Phyllis, I have Chris, and you have...
Sylvia Bradshaw. Come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right.
From the 4 generations that love Bob. Here she comes. I got the E, one of the E's. Welcome, Sylvia. What are we bidding on, please?
It's a beautiful Asperia Prowler, the latest in cutting-edge stealth boarding technology.
And you get the first bid, Sylvia.
26 million UEC.
Here's Joy.
23 million.
Chris, what do you say?
Based off the Carrack, I'll say 24.
And now, Phyllis.
I'll say 24 million
51.
and one, Bob.
All right, you've all overbid.
Now, we all know Star Citizen is a game with a few bugs, a few inconsistencies. And so it's not all that shocking when we see something that's a little bit out of place. Now, when I had first heard about this from Execute over at the Info Runners, I thought that perhaps he was experimenting with edibles and misplaced a decimal point. But no. I went and checked it myself in ArcCorp. The Prowler is 2.5 million. It costs less than a Hoplite, which is 3.3. Less than a Hoplite, yet close to what, double the price in the real world? It costs relatively the same as a Carrack, and yet is worth a tenth in the persistent universe. But realistically, that's not all that surprising. When the Prowler first came out, you may remember that there was a little bit of controversy over some of the things that I said about the Prowler. And, that controversy unfortunately still remains. But one of the things that I additionally said is that I was not going to buy this ship. That it was essentially an overpriced stealth Cutlass. And, in fact, less of a ship than the Cutlass, for over 4 times the price, and there was no way I was going to buy it. You have to understand that prestige pricing does not translate into the persistent universe. It really doesn't. And that's when you hear me talking about ships like the Caterpillar, ships like the Corsair, things like that, things that are much more reasonably priced, where you can actually see that, okay, yeah, this is going to be somewhat, this is going to translate very well into the persistent universe. This is a ship that isn't running around with a chicken with its head cut off. I'm sorry, it's just, this footage is so distracting, but it's the perfect illustration of bugs. In which I at first I kind of thought that price was, and then I was like, no, it actually does make sense, because it really is just a drop ship with no cargo capacity. It's kind of a 1 or 2 trick pony. It's nothing special, and yet they charge this enormous premium for it. Now, do I think that other ships are like that? Certainly there are. You may remember, those of you who've been watching this channel for a long time may remember that at one point I owned a Glaive, and I got rid of it because I just, I could not justify that much money sunk into a fighter, and so I got rid of it. And, at times I've been tempted to get the buyback, but I couldn't justify a fighter for the price of what the Reclaimer originally was. It didn't make sense. And that's the thing, when you look at the price that CIG charges for something, things like the Caterpillar, things like the Carrack are going to be ships that magnify their value in the persistent universe, because you can see the material usefulness within the universe for these ships. You can see how, they are going to carry your character. And certainly when we talk about things like the long-term MMO player point of view, that's what we look for. We look for long-term value. We look for the ships that are going to give us a serious leg up in the careers that we pursued that are still reasonably priced. And, you can make a case for the Prowler is going to be useful in the persistent universe, but 425 useful? I don't think so. I think someone was on the 420 when they kind of came up with the idea for the pricing. And that's, And that's pretty much the reality. When you look at these prestige ships, you may notice that there's something missing, and it really is. It's just they are not going to manifest that value in the persistent universe. There are great ships in Star Citizen. There's a lot of great ships. When I look at something like a Kraken or an Idris or even a Javelin, yeah, there are going to be some issues with that ship, but for the players that use those ships correctly, yes, you are going to see manifest value, I think, in the persistent universe. How much you want to spend is up to you, but you are going to see that value return to you in the persistent universe. But when you're buying prestige ships and ships that have this completely out of whack pricing on them, certainly, like the Prowler, you're never going to see that manifest in the persistent universe. And this is just kind of an unfortunate illustration of this. We are coming up to an anniversary sale. And, this is something that I like to remind players. Always kind of look at your hangar and look at what you have and think about the ships that are going to propel you forward in the persistent universe. If you look at the pricing of most of the fighters, you can easily see, like, I screw around in my Caterpillar to get background footage for you guys so that you guys are always seeing fresh background footage, right? I'm not really trying to make money because, as we all know, the idea that we're keeping the money that we're making now, slightly dubious at best. And so I'm just doing it as a joke. But I've already made more than enough to, you can see that not even trying, I'm easily getting to enough money to buy just about any fighter in the game with in-game cash. I'm not that far off. If you count my alt, I'm not that far off from being able to straight up buy the Prowler in-game. I just have to transfer the money over. That's when you start to look at ships in the ship sales. You have to look for that material value in the persistent universe. You have to look at that practical value. At the end of the day, a Ferrari may be a beautiful car, but it's just a car and it doesn't come with a lot of usability. It's a prestige item, to be sure, but at the end, is it practical? And that's a tough question to ask. And I've been in that position before where I've been able to afford something, but then I've turned around and said, yeah, but is it practical? And I am unfortunately one of those guys. I am like a consummate pragmatist, and I've looked at things and said, yeah, I can afford it, but is it practical? No, it isn't. So I just go, then it's not worth it. Some people might not agree with that point of view or that way of looking at the world, but that is how I view the world and how I view things in them, and I assign them value, like actual value as far as I'm concerned. And that's how I look at ships in Star Citizen. I don't care if they're flashy. I don't care if they have polished, beautiful interiors or it's all exposed wires and exposed pipes. What on day one, when the money counts and when all the chips are down and you have to go and you have to start making money, do you want to be chipping away at a ship that has a very limited mission profile, or do you want to be sitting there and just going ahead by leaps and bounds? Because that's another MMO thing. MMO players, we're always looking for the head start. We're always looking for the leg up, the hidden value, the things that propel us further than the other players, that let us grab a lead early and take and keep that lead. And, ships like the Caterpillar, ships like the Hercules, ships like the Carrack are those kinds of ships. Another person was commenting, do you think that the Carrack would be a decent cargo ship? And realistically, it's only about 100 cargo units under a Caterpillar. I think, what is it? It's 454 or something like that. Correct me in the comments below. But it's not that far off. And when you're looking at maximum available stocks at locations, it's easy to see how you could still fill up that cargo space, maybe not with volume, but with value. And you could make up, a little bit of that difference, and you could see a lot of practical value, even in something as mundane as cargo hauling, out of something like a Carrack. And we haven't seen all the modules and all the little add-ons that we can sub into the Carrack, or the Caterpillar for that matter. So you can see how those ships have a very real, very huge practical value to the average player in Star Citizen right away. And down the road, that only looks to expand. But something like the Prowler, or something like most of the fighters in this game, they're one-trick ponies. And realistically, looking at the rewards that you can get from these things, that trick don't pay that much. And that's something that you have to think about. If somebody goofing around in a Caterpillar can buy most of the fighters that you've invested in and you've spent like good hard money in, maybe it's time to look at those fighters and say, are these just kind of like feel-good items? Are these kind of prestige items? Or are these items that I really see in the persistent universe actually paying off and propelling me forward? Now, if you decide, I just want to be an ace fighter pilot, that's all I want to be, good. You're golden. You're set up. But if you want to be an ace fighter pilot and pay for your fighters and all your mods on the side doing something else, maybe it's time to think about the more practical ships, not the prestige ships. So when you hear me talking about these things, and when you hear me saying like fighters are not a good idea, fighters are a good idea in Squadron 42, but in Star Citizen, it's a whole different ballgame. And you really have to look at, I mean, if you want to get that leg up, if you want to get that advantage, you have to look at the fundamental practical values of these ships in the Star Citizen universe. It really does matter. It matters a lot more than a lot of people seem to think.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.